Random House Audio Assets presents Power Failure, the inside story of the collapse of Enron, by Mimi Swartz with Sherron Watkins. Read for you by Henry Levya. Power Failure. For as far back as anyone could remember, since 1958 when he'd started his firm, the old money families in Houston had referred to Fayez Sarafim by his first name only, as if he were a secret they all shared. These were the families whose wealth dated back to cattle and cotton and timber, but more importantly, they were the families who had made their money in oil early, in the first 20 years of the 20th century. To them, the enigmatic Egyptian with the flawless manners was someone to be respected and revered. They admired his taste in general. Sarafim always seemed to know what was new and best before they did. But mostly, they admired his taste in money. Families who had made their fortunes in oil knew just how volatile the business was, how quickly prosperity could vanish, and so depended on Sarafim and his investment firm for stability. He was a man for whom consistency was a daily practice. Nervous energy is a great destroyer of wealth, Sarafim liked to say, and he lived by those words. He detested risky investments. In 1997, barons called him a brand name champion. He liked Gillette. He liked IBM. He liked Warren Buffett. But in the late 1990s, something happened to Sarafim's loyal clientele. The bull market was raging, and they wanted him to invest their money in a company called Enron. Enron was then the world's leading energy company. From 1998 to 2000, the stock price bounded from around $2.40 a share to close to $90 a share. And better yet, it was a Houston company. The old money crowd was very taken by Enron's CEO, Ken Lay. They worked with him to raise money for the Greater Houston United Way and the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. Ken Lay was a good man, they insisted. He knew what he was doing. Buy Enron. Put me in Enron. It was like a fever. That if Sarafim had been in Houston in the oil-crazed 1920s might have seemed familiar. But Sarafim was immune to such entreaties. Nervous energy is a great destroyer of wealth, and he would refuse. His explanation was very simple. I can't understand their balance sheets. He didn't put his clients in anything he didn't invest in himself, and he wasn't investing in Enron. He made them mad. Fayez was getting old, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the wildcatters complained. Fayez couldn't see the future when it was staring him in the face. Fayez, they said, just doesn't get it. Sherron Watkins went to the Enron Corporation's November Management Conference for the year 2000, determined she wouldn't be taken for a loser. The year before, at her first such meeting after being promoted to vice president, she had blown it. Booked into the Hill Country Hyatt and Resort for 3 days, she had opted in the recreational hours for the company-sponsored salsa-making class. At affairs such as these, where Enron took over the entire hotel and offered an array of afternoon networking and socializing activities, it was important to pick one that would advance your career. Salsa making had turned out to be a disaster. Sherron was chopping jalapenos with 3 pipeline guys when the then COO, soon-to-be CEO, Jeff Skilling, had poked his head into the room and caught sight of her. Hi, Sherron, Skilling had said. And then whoosh, he was gone. In his wake, Sherron found herself enveloped in that uniquely Enronian sense of dread. She knew she'd been caught with a bunch of losers, far, far away from Skilling's winning team. Once the pipeline guys had mattered. Enron had been one of the largest pipeline companies in North America. But that was more than a decade ago, in the 1980s. In the late 80s, Enron revolutionized the way natural gas was bought and sold by operating more like a finance company than a gas company. In the mid-90s, Enron started selling and trading power. Lately, with the boom in .com and high-tech companies, Enron had been morphing into an internet telecommunications conglomerate. So if you wanted to get ahead at Enron, you had to be able to change too. Sherron, for instance, had successfully engineered herself into the hottest sector of the company, broadband. Broadband had proved yet again that Enron's employees were the smartest, the shrewdest, the most dedicated and ambitious on the whole planet. They were purveyors not of products, but of ideas, of what Jeff Skilling called intellectual capital. A company didn't need bricks and mortar to triumph in the new age. It needed smarts. Smarts that, as Skilling liked to claim, would propel Enron from its old role as the world's leading energy company to its destiny as the world's leading company. In just 5 years, Enron had grown to rival 1990s tech giants like Cisco and Microsoft and behemoths like GE. Fortune magazine had hailed Enron as the country's most innovative company for 5 years in a row, and had included Enron in its list of the best 100 companies to work for in America. Everywhere Sherron Watkins looked, there were bright young people who had made revolutionary changes and reaped incomprehensible fortunes in return, and all before getting close to their 40th birthdays. Enron was, in short, a company of winners. Certainly, Enron had worked for Sherron Watkins. She had grown up in the small Texas town of Tomball, in a 2-bedroom house she had shared with her divorced mother and younger sister. Her mother, Shirley, taught business at a nearby high school and encouraged Sherron to go into accounting. Sherron took her advice, graduating from the University of Texas with honors and getting a master's in accounting in 1982. Arthur Andersen had recruited her, promoted her to audit manager, and at her request shipped her to the New York office in 1987. From Andersen, Sherron worked briefly in finance at a Manhattan shop, then followed the well-trod path from the offices of Andersen to those of its biggest client, Enron. She could hardly believe her luck when she'd been hired. She loved Enron's oval-shaped tower of mirrored glass, with its twin tower rising across the street, the purposeful people scurrying across the lobby's glossy granite floor to get to their desks faster, the brightly colored ceiling banners heralding employees' commitment to Enron's vision and values. The lobby's 12-foot multi-screen television reported perpetual New York Stock Exchange, NYMEX, and Enron online updates. The company cafe featured spring rolls and gourmet wraps. The company coffee bar featured custom lattes and mochas. Many massages were available in the company gym. It was almost but not quite too much. If you deserved all this, you had to know you were very, very important. Of course, there was a downside. It wasn't easy being the company of the future. Enron was constantly reorganizing to stay ahead of the pack, and for 7 careful years, Sherron had parlayed her background in accounting into one job as a portfolio manager for various multi-million-dollar funds, another job in which she wined and dined bankers to keep loans flowing, and another in which she traveled the world to drum up new clients for Enron's international energy division. But every time she got comfortable, she'd get word that a reorganization was underway and she'd have to start all over again. She knew from office gossip, in fact, that her boss in broadband was on the way out. If Sherron wasn't careful, she would be too. By the time the sun had set on the Hill Country Hyatt, Enron's executives had set up central command in the bar. The occupying army was mostly young, average age at Enron was around 30, mostly male, and dressed in khakis and golf shirts, the studiedly casual uniform favored by young, upwardly mobile professionals. Some were Texans, but many had come from the Midwest. Wherever they came from, they were all obviously hungry, restless, and tightly wound. When Sherron worked in Manhattan in her 20s, she was one of those strapping, blonde, good-humored Texas girls who could drink her dates under the table. Guys fought to give her rides back to the city in their private planes after weekends in the Hamptons. But now she was 41, married to a fellow Texan, and they had a 1-year-old daughter. Sherron had a reputation as a bull in a china shop. The buzzsaw, they called her, because she was stubborn, didn't suffer fools, and after 6 years in Manhattan, used words like circle jerk and dickweed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?